Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sports journalist Manouk Akopyan. Today, we are joined by Hall of Fame promoter Bob Arum, who, last I checked on the numbers tab, he had 54 years presiding over 2,079 fight cards, 655 world title bouts, and we're going to get through each and every one of those cards in a second, Bob. But most importantly, you were a part of the financial fight of the century, as I like to call it, in Manny Pacquiao versus Floyd Mayweather 5 years ago when the two finally met. And I want to take this time to kind of reflect on that fight a little bit. From the moment the contract was finally signed after years of marinating it and to the promotion to fight night, all the way down to tabulating those astronomical numbers afterwards. Bob, I want to know, what's your favorite memory of that entire experience?
When it was over. I mean, it was not a good experience. It was not a good experience. HBO and Showtime couldn't get along. They were really petty. Hayman and Top Rank at each other's throats throughout the promotion. It is an absolute miracle that it did as well as it did financially because of all the time wasted with everybody fighting with everybody else. You remember the ticket situation? I mean, when Hayman started taking, there was supposed to be a division of the tickets, 50-50, and Hayman had a deal to get more tickets, so we put a stop to it and we wouldn't allow tickets to go on sale. I mean, it was a horror, the promotion. So I don't have good memories about it. I really don't. I mean, it was nice, but that's not really what I remember about that event. At contrast with the last fight, the Wilder Fury fight, where we worked with PBC, Al Hayman's company, where Fox and ESPN worked together. I mean, that was the way an event should be done. I mean, it was seamless. Everybody working together, everybody was on the same page. And since that was the last experience we had, I'd rather even dwell on that than go back to the horror that I went through during the Pacquiao-Mayweather.
It sounds like, you're a tender 88, but it sounds like it aged you a lot more than what the birth certificate might say.
I don't know if it aged me, but certainly it filled me with a lot of angst. I mean, again, part of life is enjoying what you're doing. And particularly at my age. I mean, the reason I'm still doing it is because I enjoy it. But if I had to go through another one or another two of the experiences in Mayweather-Pacquiao, I would be in retirement like I've been for the last 6 weeks.
Well, one of the big reasons I think that angst was created was because this was about 5 or 6 years in the making. Looking back at it in hindsight, I know you like to use the word marinate a lot. Do you feel like this fight marinated a little bit too long than you would have liked?
Again, from a standpoint of the ability of the fighters, yes, the fighters were on their downside. From the standpoint of making it the tremendous financial success that it was, probably not, because people talked about this for years and finally it happened and everybody was tuned in. So, but as an athletic contest, absolutely. This was two fighters who had been absolutely sensational during their prime, and they were no longer in their prime when they fought each other.
Now, you presided over Floyd's career for so many years before he got out of his contract. In your heart of hearts, who did you think was going to win that fight? Did you think that was fool's gold, thinking Pacquiao might have a chance?
I don't know. I thought that first of all, it was a lot better fight than, people were so anticipating the fight that unless it turned out to be an Ali Fraser 3 fight, they would have panned it. It turned out to be a good scientific kind of fight. And no question that Mayweather was the better scientific fighter, was the better technical fighter. Manny's strength was in his elusiveness and more of his offensive ability. When Manny fought a technical guy, he was not as good as just getting in and slugging with somebody. Look at the Marquez fights. I mean, Manny struggled in those fights, all of them. Forget about the fact that he got knocked out in the last one. But, ESPN just showed the second fight, and the announcers who were doing it live had Marquez winning the fight. And one of the judges had Marquez winning the fight. Mm-hmm. And at best, it was a close, even fight. Manny's knockdown gave him the fight. So, again, I thought that Mayweather had to be favored going into the fight because Manny had difficulty with a superb technical fighter, as was Mayweather.
Now, like we mentioned, you've presided over 5 decades of boxing's best breadwinners. But how do you think this fight specifically changed the business model of the sport that you've been adapting now moving forward?
I think this fight was a wake-up call, which we didn't realize at the time, that you had to reach an audience outside of boxing in order to do these kind of numbers. And I think that because it wasn't the fight that people were hoping that it would be, a knockdown brawl, which I felt it would never be, people were turned off, and closed circuit boxing has pretty much been on the decline since that fight.
Why would you specifically point to closed circuit?
I mean, pay-per-view. I'm sorry.
Yes, pay-per-view.
Pay-per-view.
Why would you say so? Because they felt they were robbed of their $100?
Well, for the fact that they weren't robbed of their $100. I didn't think they felt that the $100 wasn't worth it. If they had paid $30 or $40 for it, they might have thought otherwise. $100 was a lot of money. So was $80 a lot of money. Look at the UK, where pay-per-view is so successful, where a country that's really nowhere near the size of the United States, where they do for a big fight that's on prime time in the UK, over 1 million buys. Well, but look at the prices. It's £20, £25, of which they got to give 20% to the government anyway on the VAT. That's more affordable. In the United States, unless it's a Hispanic fight, where the Hispanic population in the United States is used to watching these fights with like 6, 7, 8 couples, 15, 16 people, and everybody chips in, it's not affordable for the normal person to pay $80 or $100 to watch an event. And that's why we have to be very, very careful when we open up and we start doing events to watch the prices, because people are not going to watch the fights in big groups in their homes the way they had before.
Do you think that price tag is going to be substantially lower moving forward on the pay-per-view, maybe in the interim?
I think it has to be. It has to be, particularly since more and more of the buys are going to shift from like DirecTV or Dish, which are contracting, to digital platforms like ESPN Plus or Fox, which accounted for a great number of the buys on the Fury Wilder fight.
Right, and let's talk about that a little bit. How did this PBC and Top Rank union 5 years ago and HBO Showtime network cooperation allow for you to stage a Wilder Fury as you did today? I mean, you had the building blocks to learn what went wrong and fix things as it went into this fight. How are you still applying these building blocks into the third fight?
I remember when we sat down with the PBC guys, our first meeting, which we had in a conference room at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. And when I looked at Al, and he said, "Bob, I promise you that what happened last time, it will not happen again. We will all work cooperatively to make this a big event." And he lived up to his word, and we lived up to his word, and we had two really great entities in ESPN and Fox who knew and know how to work collegially together. Look, I remember when years ago, when a CBS would be doing the National Football League, and ABC would be doing the National Football League. And God forbid they wouldn't even mention that on Monday night, they were doing it on Sunday, that ABC had a great football game. They'd never mention it because it was on a different network. Now you see how different they act, how Fox and ESPN and CBS all tout the other guy's game that's coming up. So the networks have learned that this petty stuff that went on before, which they were guilty of, doesn't make sense from a business standpoint, from an editorial standpoint. So they now, and the NFL and the NBA has had a lot of influence on changing the way they present product. We in boxing were saddled with two premium networks that really had no business being in the boxing business. They weren't sports networks; they were entertainment. I mean, now during this, when we're all in effect on quarantine and home, you realize what unbelievable product an HBO has. I mean, we've been binging on HBO, and you finish one and there's another, and and then you go to a streaming network like Hulu or Netflix. But again, and Showtime has great entertainment, great entertainment. They don't belong in boxing. Thank God for them that they kept boxing alive, because they were the only ones putting money in. But again, there was no real marriage between Showtime, HBO, and boxing.
Mhm. Now, looking back at it, you're working with ESPN and Fox. Let's say ESPN and Fox were promoting the machine that was Mayweather and Pacquiao. What do you think that 4.6 million pay-per-view number would have been 5 years ago with the advent of all this new digital media and apps that you're mentioning?
I don't know, because remember, we had to delay that fight for like 20 to 30 minutes because the cable systems were overwhelmed with people, buying it at the last minute. So I don't know if you could have done more. I really don't. I mean, it was just incredible. Uh, but obviously, having ESPN and Fox publicizing and helping with the promotion is enormous.
Now, you talked about that angst and how the relationship has repaired with Al Hayman. Well, he doesn't talk, but you've said some things about him throughout the past. How would you describe your relationship with Al Hayman 10 years ago versus today?
Well, I don't know 10 years ago, but I know at the time of the Pacquiao Mayweather fight, couldn't have been worse. He got this hunk of money from this mutual fund or hedge fund, and their idea with the money was to drive everybody out of business, and we fought back, and so it was war. It was brutal. But now I think, particularly with how we conducted ourselves in the Wilder Fury promotion, we've learned lessons, and I think you'll see a lot of joint promotions in the months and years ahead once we get this coronavirus situation behind us.
Is it fair to say that Al Hayman and Bob Arum send each other Christmas baskets and holiday cards now?
No, but we don't attack each other on programs like this.
Now, with that, I have to ask with Muhammad Ali. I have to bring Muhammad Ali because if you were a part of 27 Ali fights, how many pay-per-views do you think Muhammad Ali would sell today?
I don't know. Again, remember, people forget, in 1976, September 76, Ali fought Kenny Norton, right? And that was at Yankee Stadium with the police strike and everything. But the closed circuit, because remember, we didn't have pay-per-view, and the closed circuit revenue for that fight was terrible. So that from 1976 to June of 1980, there wasn't another closed circuit fight. That Ali Spinks, the two fights were on network television. The Ali Spinks second fight set records for any program on network television. And it wasn't until Ray Leonard and Duran, where Ray's people said, let's try going back to closed circuit, and let's just roll the dice instead of just taking network money. And that turned out to be a huge, huge success. And that opened the gate to more closed circuit, which ultimately led to pay-per-view once the technology came around. So to talk about Ali, the last thing we have to remember about Ali was on that third Ali Norton fight, it laid an egg. And Ali, I guess the fight with Holmes at the end in 81, when Ray and Duran had revived the closed circuit business, was on closed circuit. But Ali, I don't know how he would have done. Depends on who he fought. I think the Frazier fights would have done really well, but you can't project that way. You really can't. I mean, we now know Ali, the icon that he was, and so forth. But I remember the last Ali closed circuit with Norton did very poorly.
But in today's society, he would have probably if he was fighting today and been Muhammad Ali in his prime today, he would have probably blown all the numbers out the water, wouldn't he?
We don't know that.
No.
We don't know that. We don't know that. It's easy to say, and I'd love to say it because I can't be contradicted one way or the other, but I'm not sure.
Let's talk about one other heavyweight that you are part of their career. Mike Tyson, in the early on stages of his career, you had a handful of his fights. What was that process, and what were those days like, considering you had another piece at the heavyweight division?
Tyson was out of control. He was somebody that unless you fought him every other week, he would do something bad and get into trouble. He was like a time bomb ready to explode at any given time. Early on, before Tyson made his move to fighting for a world title and so forth, we had him on ESPN almost every other week. And it ended up, he was more trouble than he was worth, because you'd have to spend all the time worrying about him, catering to him. Fighters would get in the ring with him, and they weren't world caliber fighters. They were just normal guys. He was coming up, and they would like have a heart attack before the bell rang. You know, you'd see their legs shaking before the fight even started. So it was very, very difficult. And we decided, or Teddy Brenner, who was my matchmaker, decided to pass on him. Now, maybe it was a mistake, maybe it wasn't a mistake. It ended up, yeah, where I would have liked to done a lot of Tyson fights later on in his career. But anyway, I'm 88 years old, and maybe it added to my life that I didn't have to go through that with Mike Tyson.
Well, right now you're perhaps breeding the next Manny Pacquiao, and what I believe could be the case in Inoue. He was set to make his his big U.S. debut. He's had a fight before in the United States, but as a headliner at the Mandalay Bay. Is it fair to say that Inoue for you is the next Manny Pacquiao, and he could be someone to live that could follow in Manny's footsteps and legacy?
Well, Manny Pacquiao is unique. Let's, you know, but you know, and Manny Pacquiao was able to project, particularly with the Philippine audience and the Philippines living in this country, Philippine Americans. And he crossed over with Hispanics. I don't know if Inoue would be that type of an attraction, but as a fighter, Inoue is tremendous. He is dynamic. He's a great puncher. And I can't wait to showcase him in the United States. I don't know when that'll happen. It certainly won't happen this summer. I mean, there's a travel ban from Japan. But eventually, Inoue will be coming to the United States, and it'll be a big attraction. And there are a lot of good guys for him to fight.
Mm-hmm. And with Manny Pacquiao, you spoke to my colleague Keith Eidick over the weekend, and it seems like you're trying to reignite those conversations with Terrence Crawford. How serious do you think that fight is going to be for Terrence Crawford and Manny Pacquiao? And is that the legitimate next fight you want to take with both fighters?
Out whether this coronavirus, what the situation is, will I be able, for example, right now, you couldn't do the fight in the United States. There's a travel ban. You can't bring over a Philippine fighter, no matter how important he is. There's nobody coming in from the Philippines, Japan, or the UK. But so I think the fight would have to be outside the United States. And the question is, if you do it in the Mideast, or you did it outside of China, but maybe in Macau, how quick they would be to open up. But we're working on it. We're working on it. This is not a period where it's business as usual.
Is the Middle East that one item on the bucket list that you really want to check before your career is all said and done? Is that a market you really want to solidify for Top Rank as a business unit moving forward, perhaps with this fight?
Well, certainly when oil was $50 a barrel, that was a target market. Now that it's down to $10 or $14 a barrel, I don't know how viable it is. But yeah, they're great fans. And the sovereign fund in Saudi Arabia wants to build up tourism, and we would be amenable to do events over there. But again, I'm looking more when we would be able to open up boxing, uh, uh, not only boxing with no audiences, but obviously boxing with audiences. And that's really what I'm looking at and working on every day. And that is going to depend in large measure on how we develop testing. Now, there is no reason, I'm not a scientist, there is no reason in this country with our resource that we can't develop a test that would be readily available, that could be taken and give results back in 5 minutes. There are these tests now. We have to make more. And once we get the testing done, we can begin to do events, even events with spectators. Because everybody said, you remember back on 9/11, after 9/11, people would say, how can you waste the time of people checking on security, that they wouldn't be bringing a bomb into an arena? So what did we do? We put up these devices. People have to walk through, right? That people don't remember. That wasn't the norm. Now it's the norm. Now, maybe if you get these testing, you then open up like 100 or 200 booths around an arena. People wait in line, and in 5 minutes they're tested, and if they're okay, you practice something on them, and they can come in and watch the event. That is possible. Everything is going to change, and we have to be smart about it and make it change so that it works for everybody.
Well, I know you're not a big fan of Donald Trump. We're also out of sight. You can pass the message to him firsthand. But what I think you're really focused on right now is Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, the third fight. And you look outside in your backyard, you see a dark strip, Bob. Uh, how feasible is that fight going to be to stage a trilogy? I know we talked about it a few months ago. First, you told me July 18. Now it's looking like October 3rd, but is October 3rd now being moved to another prospective date as well?
I talked to Tyson Fury Sunday, because I keep in contact with him, and I said the earliest I thought that the fight would happen would be November. And who knows, even November? I mean, I have big entities who are looking to do events with spectators, like the NFL, like the NBA, and they have a lot more resources than we have, and they're going to lead the way. So obviously, we can't do Fury and Wilder without an audience. And then we have to see if you're going to do it with an audience, are people going to be willing to get on a plane and come to Las Vegas? And because so many of the fans, as you remember in that fight, came from the UK, if there's a travel ban, they can't get over here. So a lot of that has to be taken into account, and maybe it doesn't happen until next year. In other words, these are not really boxing kind of questions. This is how the world is developing, and I don't have all the answers or part of the answers, and I'm not going to make up stuff because, our president makes a lot of mistakes by talking about things he knows nothing about, hasn't studied. And, I maybe have a solution. I mean, everybody who is admitted the live audience in the Tyson Fury fight has to swallow a glass of Lysol.
Well, Bob, is it safe to say that as soon as the NBA and NFL come out and say we are ready for fans in its entirety, we are ready to sell out a stadium, you would pretty much move forward with the Wilder Fury fight immediately after with a date?
Right, because knowing Adam Silver, who's the head of the NBA, and Goodall, the head of the NFL, they're not going to open for the public unless there are safeguards in place. And we will certainly see what they're doing and follow accordingly. We're not going to be cowboys. We're not Dana White. We're going to proceed cautiously in accordance with the regulations of states so that the participants and everybody are protected in these trying times. We're not going to go off on our own. We're not going to say the show must go on, because the show doesn't have to go on unless it's safe. And we're going to work with responsible commissions and governors in states like Nevada and California as we go forward.
Well, Bob, I'm looking forward to getting back to normal life. In the meantime, we can work on perfecting our facial hair.
Isn't that good? Yeah, first beard I've ever had.
Coming along good. Wishing you plenty of health, and looking forward to seeing you again in the near future in the sport we love, doing what we love, and hopefully that is sooner, very soon, rather than later. And Bob,
yeah, let's be optimistic, but let's not be crazy.
Absolutely, I agree with you. That I agree there, because we don't want to be crazy with the decisions of covering a fight or staging a fight when all the signs are saying no. So we look forward for you to make decisions that are going to look out for the safety of the fighters and the public, and looking forward to seeing boxing and Top Rank back on our screens and stadiums.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. And sooner rather than later, we'll be back in action.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you.
Good day.